Hey, fellow comic book fans, and welcome to episode number 9 of the Brazen Bull's weekly comic book podcast, where every Wednesday we weigh in on comics so you can decide what to read and what not to. I'm your host, Charlie Chipman, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Dave Robbins.
Hello, friends.
And Ben Peterson.
Hello.
On today's show, we'll be weighing in on Hit Girl number 2 and Cyberforce number 1 from Image, The Terrifics number 2 and Silencer number 3 from DC, Shadowman number 1 from Valiant, and The Crow, Momento Mori number 1 from IDW.
Today's Wednesday, March 28th, and it's New Comic Book Day.
Okay, so this week we have a new Hit Girl out. So Hit Girl number 2 by Image. We got Mark Millar and Ricardo Lopez Ortiz. So once again, we're following Hit Girl with her hired killer in tow that she sprang, carving a bloody path through the Colombian underworld. But how long will their fun last? Dave, what do you think?
So Hit Girl, our tween sociopath assassin, shows up in South America, manipulates big-time gangster fellow to kill all his rivals, and then ultimately, I think what's going to happen is just that everybody's going to be turned upon, and Hit Girl escapes, and all the bad guys are dead, and she lives happily ever after. I'm not seeing anything here that I haven't seen before, really. I think essentially what I'm seeing then is exactly what the fans of Hit Girl want. So to me, this looks like the ultimate in fan service. Just give the fans what they want and then just kind of walk away from it. So I'm not saying it's bad. I just think that it's just uninspired.
Well, I don't know if it's all uninspired. I liked some of the weapons that was very nice.
Yeah. This was like you said, Dave. This was totally for the fans, through and through. I was excited throughout the entire reading. I think that this is Hit Girl number 2 is exactly the comic book that I was hoping it would be. I think that anything I could have asked for and more, I got out of the book, so I can't complain about the progression of plot or anything like that, because it was really cool. And at some point, I really need a comic book that's very entertaining, that's cool, that's interesting, and that's exceeds expectations, because issue number 1 was a book that we all really enjoyed. So here we go again, going into issue number 2, and we've talked about this before, how important issue number 1 is, and how it can really put some serious pressure on issue number 2. This was one of those series that had a whole lot of pressure put on issue number 2, and I think that it did just fine. I think that it worked very well. I think that we're still moving in a direction that's interesting. I think that it's not entirely original or unfamiliar. I think that there's a lot about this book that is familiar, but I think at the end of the day that the reading experience was just so exciting and entertaining that I couldn't help but love it. So
Yeah, I definitely get that one, because even though the overall plot maybe didn't go that far ahead, it was a fun way of getting nowhere.
Yeah.
Like just all the different ways they were doing things. And I mean, there's a little bit, of plot movement too, they're getting some stuff, but yeah, no, I think it was, I personally really enjoyed it. I gave it a higher score, but once again, just like the first one, I think the writing is good. The art goes very well with the story. Agreed. I wasn't surprised by any of it, but I was entertained by all of it.
I did enjoy the innovations in gadgetry and the wild animals.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately, it appears that some wild animals were harmed in the making of this comic book.
Yes, most certainly were. Yeah, but they it was entertaining, to say the least, and we got our money's worth with this comic book. You definitely do. It was every time someone died in this comic book, or I should say was killed in this comic book, it was epic. Like, it was really intense and violent, and it was just, again, it was cool. Like,
Right? There's no mild killing.
no, it's you know, turned up to 11 every time someone dies.
Okay. All right.
Well,
You know, now that I made the Spinal Tap reference, how about we give our scores? What do you got, Dave?
I gave it a 7.
Okay, and Ben?
8.5.
All right, and it's going to get an 8 from me, so overall we're giving Hit Girl number 2 an 8.
All right. Well, also from Image, we have Cyberforce, which, as you guys were explaining to me, is kind of a reboot. So it's by creator Mark Silvestri. In issue 1, we were introduced to Morgan Stryker, the sole, more or less, survivor of a terrorist attack. He's wounded and he's saved by his employers, but for what purpose? Charlie, lead us off.
Yeah, sure. So we were talking before we actually started recording this, and I was explaining to Ben and Dave how my first introduction to comic books really came from books like Cyberforce. Growing up in the 90s, you know, when all these books were coming out, there were comic books everywhere. Everybody was trying to find that brand new character, that new group, and you know, everything was violent, everything was intense, and you know, everything was turned up to 11. There it is again. But these were the kinds of books that I was most fond of. I would randomly get comic books like Cyberforce. You know, whether someone gave me a stack of them, you know, I'm a 6-year-old kid, 7-year-old kid, you know, here, check these out, you know, all mixed up. I wasn't sitting there every month reading Batman comics or X-Men comics. It was, you know, I pretty much got whatever was given to me. And looking at a comic book like Cyberforce now, yes, it's updated, it's reimagined, whatever you want. I just can't help but you know, look at it very fondly. And I don't want to say that I necessarily went into my reading with high expectations, but there were some expectations there. And I think that overall, my expectations were met. Again, we have a book that's well written, well illustrated. For an issue number 1, there was a whole lot of explaining going on, a whole lot of introduction, as you would, as one would assume. But interestingly, the majority of the action, or really all of the action, takes place within the first few pages of the book. And I think that it's so intense that it really generates this huge momentum and allows, you know, it pushes readers through the book. You know, not a whole lot happens after the first, like I said, handful of pages, but enough happened in those pages. And I'm just really eager to see where this goes and how it develops. I was, like I said, my expectations were met. You know, I can't help but, like I said, look at the series fondly. But what about you guys? Dave, what do you think, sir?
I liked it. Yeah, I knew that there was a backstory. I kind of recalled some of the whole Cyberforce thing before, but that didn't burden this iteration of it. This is a story that begins with Morgan Stryker, his relationship with his daughter, his relationship with his employers, and kind of a revenge, kind of justice story about the person who set all this stuff in motion. And I liked it. I think there's an adventure to come. I think there are personal character developments to come and personal stories. And there's probably some intrigue. There's probably some secrets that need to get uncovered. I think it's a good start. I think they have a lot of things to play with in a story that could become something pretty broad and you know, interesting to really pretty much anyone. It's not an overly super powered type thing. It's a humanity cyborg suspense kind of story. So yeah, I think this is something that has a lot of potential.
Good. Now, Ben, I know that you were relatively unfamiliar with Cyberforce. So going into this, what did you think?
Yeah, I am going to agree with Dave on the. Even though there is the backstory, this stands alone by itself. Like you don't have to know the backstory at all to pick this up, read it. It'll explain what you need to know without a problem. Like I found that the writing was good, the artwork was good. Now for me, for whatever reason, I just wasn't like super drawn into it.
Okay.
Now that may have just been my mood this weekend because really nothing overly drew me into it. Even if I enjoyed it like this, I enjoyed it. I just wasn't like crazy into it. But clearly the two of you, I think, were a little bit more so.
Yeah.
Well, what'd you give for a score?
So I wound up giving Cyberforce #1 an 8 out of 10.
I gave it a 7.5.
And I gave it a 7.
All right. So Cyberforce #1 gets overall a 7.5.
Okay. Now, Charlie, I'm going to let you take this one once I explain it. Is because I know you like the Terrifics. So Terrifics Part 2 by DC. Once again, we meet the Terrifics after their little message from Tom Strong, who's now missing, about saving the universe, what every team ever wants to get. So they escape the dark multiverse, but find themselves unexplainably stuck together. Not physically. Well, kind of physically.
Yeah, in a way.
In a way.
Yeah. So this is another book where what I was just talking about with Hit Girl, how issue #2, while riding the momentum of issue #1, has a lot to live up to. I don't think that issue #1 of the Terrifics really blew us away as much as, say, Hit Girl #1 did, or even Kick-Ass #1 did. But we were impressed. We all did like the book. And I think still with those expectations going into the Terrifics #2, those expectations were managed, and ultimately the book wound up living up to expectations and gave readers what they wanted. Here we definitely have more of a plot progression. There's not a whole lot going on, but we're moving in a direction that's positive and it's interesting. And we were talking about this before, but I think that this is an absolute dream series for any artist to jump into. This book is beautiful. There's some really dynamic illustrations, the scene work, the paneling, everything. It just looks absolutely fantastic. I think that being able to illustrate a character like Plastic Man really helps. But really, the Terrifics, this series looks, unlike anything else that's on the shelves right now. So I'm very impressed with the way it looks. And my only, I don't even want to call it a complaint, is I do feel like issue #2 is really issue #1 and a half. And I feel like issue #3 is going to be the same because this beginning arc is the Meet the Terrifics. So essentially it is an extended sort of introduction, but despite that, I think that this extended introduction is working and it's very entertaining. So I'm pleased with the book.
I think you really hit the nail on the head with talking about the art. I mean, it's the thing that jumps out as soon as you open the book. It's vibrant, it's bold, it's kind of throwback to old school comic books, but each page is detailed and there's changes in perspectives, and it's just really wonderful. It's really beautiful. The story is interesting in that we get to see the dynamics of the group before they even become a group. I like that. I still don't know exactly what's going on, which is great. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I'm just feeling like I'm jumping into this as much as the four of them are jumping into it, and we're going to have things revealed to us as time goes on. Now that Mr. Terrific really needs to figure it out, and he needs to figure it out with his friends with him as well, because he can't cut out from them like he would like to do, which I think is just a plot gimmick. But I'm okay with that. I think they had to do that.
Yeah, they certainly had to have a reason to stay together. But you know, I enjoyed this one. I like the fact that Mr. Terrific is kind of a jerk, and like without apologizing for it. It's not like I'm trying to be a good guy, but I'm super arrogant and you know. But no, he's just like bye. Like I don't need you guys, and that was enjoyable. Like, and overall, yeah. Once again, this week I had a hard time getting into a lot of stuff, but this one was still really entertaining. They did a great job. You know, it is very, I guess, it's plot driven. This one,
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Like, it was good to get a little bit more explanation on this one. I'm totally okay with it. And once again, as you said, I mean, as both of you said, really, the artwork is fantastic in this one. I think that's, for me, like, really did it. I loved it. I just kind of like sat there for a while, like on each kind of frame, just checking it out and seeing what everything was going on, because there was a lot, and you know, I had to go back a few times, especially and check it out. So
Yeah,
absolutely a good one.
Yeah, there really was a lot going on, and like I said, Ben, taking that second look or third look, it's totally worth it. This the Terrifics issue 1 and 2, they're very rereadable, and I think that it's worth returning to them. You do get something out of your second read, even if you're just admiring the artwork. There's always something to pick out, added details, things like that you don't necessarily pick up on your first read, unless you're specifically looking. Your first read, you're focusing on the artwork and things like that. This is the series so far, issue 1 and 2. Definitely go back for a second read. But with that, how about we give some scores? Ben, what do you got for this one, sir?
I gave it an 8.
Right, and Dave?
8.5.
All right, I'm going to give it an 8.5 as well. So the Terrifics number 2 scores an 8.3.
So a great score for that one. Now we're going to go to one that may be a little bit less. The Silencer number 3. Now, we decided last time we got Silencer 2, we'd give this one another go. Here we are again with a silent silencer who finds herself in trouble again with another double cross that she has to shoot her way out of. And the enemy wants her dead, and they will do anything they have to do so, including killing their own people. I'm going to go into it right now, and if you couldn't figure it out, I'm not a huge fan of this right now. I think I'm a little poisoned with the last ones, just because like they didn't do it for me. I came into this going like, all right, I have to read the Silencer, but I don't know what I'm not a huge fan of the artwork right now. It's just not doing it for me, and it's just I don't have enough plot maybe for this character to like keep going. So I'm not overly interested in it. How about you guys?
Yeah, you guys know how I felt with issue 2.
And issue 1.
And issue 1. Yeah, I think there was a sigh in issue number 1 when I started talking about the book. And that sigh just continued with issue number 2. But there was an improvement, I thought at least, an improvement with issue number 3 coming from issue number 2. But Ben, like you pointed up, I still have a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. And I did going into the reading of issue number 3, and I was kind of saying to myself, if issue number 3 doesn't blow me away, I'm done with the series. And issue number 3 didn't blow me away. So at this point, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to keep up with Silencer anymore unless something changes, unless something drastic happens. It's falling short in multiple areas for me. Not a huge fan of the artwork either. The writing, I think Dan Abnett's doing a well enough job with the writing, but it's just not connecting. It's just not working. I don't think that the character is interesting enough. I feel almost as though I'm being forced to find this character interesting, and it's just not working.
I think for me, the storyline there's not enough story to it right now for me. It's just kind of like shoot 'em up just to shoot 'em up.
Yeah.
Well, and that gets to the part of why I like this better than the other issues, is that what saves this issue is that it's almost entirely action.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very true.
The less that we find about her family, the better it serves the story. because we know that she's a mom and she wants to take care of her family. We don't have to be reminded that, every 6 pages. We get that, we understand that, she's a former assassin. We get that, we don't have to keep being reminded. But, to battle her way out of a warehouse full of high weaponry with, I don't know, cyber soldiers or whatever they are, was a pretty cool scene. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that it got out, to the end where she's like redoubling her efforts to fight against the people that are trying to bring her back into this whole mess and find out who and why she has been brought in and why they want to kill her, etc. It's like, okay, yeah, you can propel that with the action, and we can pick it up as it goes along. Having said that, not my favorite comic this week either, but I just think it's better than it had been. So I'm cutting it more of a break than you guys are, I would say.
Yeah, probably. I did notice she did use some other, like, her silence, cone of silence, whatever you want to call it, a little differently in this one, where she's just like, I could just put it around my gun so they don't hear it. Now it seems like, okay, that's a little more useful, like if you're shooting someone as an assassin. So look at that.
Yeah, I think what should have happened, and I might be wrong here, you guys might disagree, but I think we could have completely left out issue number 2 and gone right from issue number 1, the supermarket parking lot scene, to the cyborg warehouse, and I would have been happy. I feel like now, like you said, Dave, there's some dead horses being beaten. We get it, she has a family. We get it, she's a badass assassin. I don't want to be told these things over and over again. I just want you to show me, more so than anything else. Just put it in front of me and let me say, wow, she's a badass assassin, or holy shit, she still has a family that we have to consider. I don't need to be told that over and over again. And I think that's why it's really starting to lose me. I didn't really like the idea from the beginning. The concept didn't grab me, and now that I feel like I'm being beaten over the head, it's just not working.
All right. So what score would you give it then?
I am going to give it a 6.5.
Yes, I will give it a 6.5 as well.
And I will give it a 7.5.
All right. So Silencer number 3 scores a 6.8 out of 10.
Okay. Now, going off that one, we're going to go into one that I enjoyed a little bit more, Shadowman number 1. So we got the beginning of this story arc. Writer's Andy Diggle, and the artist is Stephen. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Segovia.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right. So here we are with Shadowman as he returns from the dead side to New Orleans, and 5 years have passed. So that for him, we're not 5 years essentially. And now he comes back. He wants kind of a normal life. He wants to get rid of this family curse. But an old foe is not quite ready to let him go yet. Dave, what do you think?
I really like this. One of the things that struck me was the creepiness, the horror backdrop, the supernatural aspect of New Orleans, infusing the art and the story with every page. I thought it worked really well. Despite not exactly knowing what the story is going to be going forward, I was caught up in the sense of what it was. There are things we don't understand going on. There are curses that are real, and people protect themselves by the use of magic and the talking to spirits and what have you. And that's reality in this world. And I found it really creepy and compelling, and I enjoyed that a great deal. And this is another one of those stories that I'm aware of, the past history of Shadowman. This goes back, a number of years, and now they're bringing it back. But it doesn't really matter. The story is about this guy in the here and now, and the woman in the here and now, and how they deal with the troubles that are going on here and now. we don't really need all that backstory. I mean, we can be aware that it exists, and maybe it'll creep into the stories in the future. But right now, we know where we're at, and we know where these characters are planning to take it, and that's good enough. And wrapping that with the whole creepy atmosphere, I'm actually pretty happy about it. I'd like to follow this along pretty regularly.
I'll agree with you on that one. I'm definitely going to follow this one myself. But I like what you said with the whole. There is a backstory to Shadowman, but for this story, you don't need it at all. Me, as always, knowledge on the backstory of stuff is generally lacking. But you don't need it for Shadowman. You can jump right into it. They explain everything you need to explain. They get you into the characters, and it's just the right amount, I think, of like a mystery and action at the same time. And you have some of that horror aspect. I find it was a good speed to get me through the book. It kept me moving right through it, and had to go back and, as with many of these comic books, read it a second time to get some of the aspects of it. But it was I thought excellently done. Charlie?
Yeah, this is another one. I feel like every week I'm the one beating a dead horse now, talking about Valiant and how each book, each series that we start and we talk about here, it's very well written, very well illustrated, but it's true. And like you guys said, it doesn't matter. Shadowman could be a brand new character, no backstory at all, no history, and the book works. You could have years and an extensive backstory, and the book still works. That's not easy to do. So I think that the creative team here has to be applauded for that, for creating a series or beginning a series that is entirely accessible to new readers, and it's still rewarding to longtime readers. That balance is important, and in this issue, this series, especially atmosphere, is everything. Like you said, Dave, the fact that there's bad stuff going on and it's real in this world. There's curses and there's magic and there's evil. That's great, and I feel like that those things are always looming around while reading this, and the fact that the atmosphere is so rich and so well established, it does create a very immersive reading experience.
Yeah.
And, that's something that I look for in new series, especially, I like to pick up a book and say, this feels unlike anything else that I'm reading right now. And that gets more and more difficult the more series that I pick up and start reading. And I stay current on. So, Shadowman #1, this was a breath of fresh air for me. It was something that looked good, read good, and it felt good. Yeah. So I can't say enough good things about it. So how about we get to our scores? Ben, what do you got for this one, sir?
I give it an 8.
Right. Dave?
I gave it a 9.
All right, and it's going to be a 9 for me as well. So Shadowman #1 scores an 8.7 out of 10.
Great. Now, the last one we have tonight is Crow Memento Mori, #1. Now, this is a kind of a rehab. This is from IDW, by the way. Now, this one is kind of like a restart, a new whole story with the new Crow running around in the city of Rome with a mission. Man with a mission. What'd you guys think of this one?
So I think, again, atmosphere is everything. Just like in Shadowman, the Crow should be dark, gloomy, and I think that the book definitely has that feel. But Dave, you can talk about this a little bit more. The intimacy was lacking.
Yeah, that was definitely the word that I used.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going back to, I haven't read the Crow comic. I'll be upfront with that. But I'm a big fan of the films, especially the first film. And it's that intimacy is lacking. So Dave, why don't you jump on there?
Okay, well, I didn't realize you hadn't read the original James O'Barr, but yeah, that's the whole point of the Crow is
Mhm.
that he's a vengeance spirit, but the vengeance comes out of a personal tragedy, a very intimate personal tragedy with characters that are fully realized. I mean, the reason why this character is brought back from the dead is because there's this enormous injustice that the reader is allowed to feel from the perspective of the one that is wronged. Um, and it's a fully realized character. Well, I'm saying too much about the original.
Yeah.
This one doesn't do any of that. We have a character that to my mind is too young to have this kind of intensity, this kind of emotional impact to want to become or to be forced to become this vengeance spirit. We don't really know very much about this character David, other than he's probably the world's oldest altar boy. Yet still too young to be a vengeance spirit. Um, and he's plunged into a terrorist event in Rome, and there's all this stuff added to the reason why there's a vengeance spirit, but there's no stuff added to the reality of the characters in it. So where the strength was character stories in both the original comics and in the movie, the stuff that I found appealing, that's just not here.
So now, so Dave, do you think that this new series, has the potential to say succeed where the original renditions of The Crow succeeded, or do you think that this rough start kind of sealed its fate?
They have a lot of ground to make up for. They dumped a lot of story into it based on assumptions we'll make about terrorism and about Rome and things like that, without building enough of a basis to move everything forward. I'd take a look at the next issue to see whether some of the things that are missing in terms of making me care about this character somehow gets fleshed out. But I don't know. I don't know if. I mean, at the end of this, I actually have the feeling that this was just a one-off story almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of a monster of the week, it'd be a murder of the week. So that like next time we'll have a different vengeance spirit based on another tragedy, because that's how disinterested I was in the character of David.
I see. Ben, did you care about David at all?
Nope.
No.
I found he was a little lackluster. He didn't have enough to him for me to care about him at all. She just didn't blow me away as a character. But on the flip side, I never followed the Crow stuff really at all. I mean, I knew the Crow. It just wasn't one of those things that overly interested me. So as always, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
Sometimes I read comics just to read comics. Unfortunately for me, this is one I just read just to read it.
I see.
I read them because hopefully I'll find one that I really liked and that it's going to draw me in. Shadowman, that was one that, I was like, ooh, that actually turned out really good. The Crow, unfortunately, didn't grab me. The art didn't, compared to for just tonight, we read the Terrifics. That one, I just could sit there and look at the artwork all day.
Oh yeah.
I went through the Crow and then I was done with it, essentially. Now I agree with David. I'll take a gander at the next one. Because for most comics, I never give it a one and done. I always give everything a second chance, and I will with the Crow. And potentially they'll put in what I feel they ought to. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think that we all just need a reason to care. And I think that the intention was to, from the beginning, to just get the story moving, to kind of skip over some things, and it didn't really work. I think all of us were just kind of feeling okay about the book. I think there is potential, but there's definitely some work that has to be done. So how about we get to scores? Ben, what are you giving this one?
I'm gonna give it a 7.
All right, Dave?
7.
All right, and it's going to be a 7 for me, so 7's across the board. Overall, The Crow, Memento Mori, #1, scores a 7 out of 10. And, all right, with that being our last book that we're going to talk about, how about we give our picks of the week? Dave, why don't you lead us off, sir?
Well, another from IDW is something called Highest House, and this is the second issue, Highest House #2. Kind of a medieval kind of fantasy almost, just starting out. Looks really interesting. Really enjoyed the artwork. That one I would definitely recommend as something to pick up from IDW.
Great. Ben, what are you suggesting this week, sir?
I'm going to suggest Shadowman.
Nice.
Like, as I've said a couple times, it was a good one. You could start off without having any backstory. Always a pleasure. And it was just, it had the right amount of, for me, action and mystery to it. Like, it didn't give away too much too soon. But on the flip side, it gave you enough that you kind of care about the characters. So, always a plus.
Good. And I am going to recommend, shouldn't be a surprise, Dark Knight's Metal #6.
Batman?
Yeah. So this is the conclusion of the Dark Knight's Metal event. And man, was it an epic conclusion. A little, I don't want to say a little too epic at certain points, but it went there. And overall, I was very satisfied. I mean, there was a bunch of issues in this event. It's been a lot going on, and it ultimately, everything paid off. Again, a fantastic book to look at, very well illustrated. You guys know I'm a big fan of Scott Snyder, so not even going to get into that. But again, it was a great book. This was a fantastic event and a lovely way to end this epic event. So, again, another book I can't recommend enough, Dark Knight's Metal #6. And with that concludes this week's show. So if you're listening, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like this video, and visit thebrazenbull.com for more great comic book content. Until next week.
Bye.
Adios.